Welcome back to another Kray video. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss any videos. And for people really into the Krays, join our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London, where you can find stuff possibly unavailable anywhere else. We're an established group and very friendly. The link is in the YouTube description section.
Welcome back. I'm going to start this part off talking about Lord Boothby. That's Lord Robert John Graham Boothby, Baron Boothby, KBE, to give him his full title. But this time, it is my side of the story. And I will talk about my meeting with the American Mafia and also the infamous gunfight at Mr. Smith's nightclub. My friendship with Lord Boothby was making headlines again. The Sunday Mirror wrote a story about a top-level Scotland Yard investigation into the alleged homosexual relationship between a prominent peer and a leading thug in the London underworld. Boothby sued them and won £40,000. The newspaper claimed that an investigation had been ordered by the Metropolitan Police Chief Commissioner Sir Joseph Simpson. The article also spoke of parties in Mayfair attended by the peer and the thug, of visits to Brighton with other prominent public men, and of a relationship between the peer, an East End gangster, and some clergymen. There were also allegations of blackmail. There was such a stink in the press that the Home Secretary Henry Brooke made a statement about it. Eventually, IPC Limited, the owners of the Sunday Mirror, apologised to Lord Boothby and paid him damages, and their chairman, Cecil King, issued a statement in which he said, "I am satisfied that any imputation of an improper nature against Lord Boothby is completely unjustified." There was no apology or damages for me, despite all the publicity which we could have done without. The only good thing about it, as far as I was concerned, was that people now knew about my bisexuality. I didn't have to try and hide my leanings anymore, but I still say there was nothing sexual between me and Lord Boothby. Apart from anything else, he wasn't my type. After all that, things weren't going too bad for me and Reg until one night in March 1966, and a tragedy which had nothing to do with us. Up until that time, we'd sort of shared control of London's underworld with the Richardson gang south of the river. Charlie Richardson and his brother Eddie controlled South London. They were scrap metal dealers who had other interests on the side. Their two top men were Frankie Fraser, who was known as Mad Frankie, and George Cornell. The Richardson gang was respected by some people and feared by others. We got on with them okay until Cornell started to mix it, stirring up trouble between us. No one liked George Cornell. He was a troublemaker and a drunk, and he liked to hurt people, especially people who couldn't defend themselves. He liked to torture old tramps and people like that. He was a bully and enjoyed cruelty and pain. The Richardsons and Frankie Fraser eventually carried the can for much of what he did. We got on okay with Frankie Fraser, and he later became a very good friend to us. But on this night in 1966, the Richardson gang went to a club called Mr. Smith's at Rushy Green on the main road from London to Eastbourne at Catford. Later it was said that they expected to find us there as well, but we knew nothing about it. We did know the club, though. It was a drinking club, a nice place. But one member of our firm was there, a close friend of ours called Richard Hart, a nice fella, about 30, who had a lovely wife and young kids. A big fight started in the club, and Richard Hart was shot to death. Everyone knew it was Cornell who shot him. Cornell had only gone there because he wanted a fight, but he was the one who got away. The others didn't. There was a big police hunt and a long trial. And at the end of it, Charlie Richardson got 25 years on various charges, Eddie Richardson got 15 years, and Frankie Fraser got 10 years. The papers called it the torture trial, because a lot of evidence was given by men who claimed they'd been tortured by the gang. Two other members of the gang, Roy Hall and Thomas Clark, also went down. I don't know about the Richardsons being involved in torture trials and things like that, but I know that Cornell did that sort of thing. Charlie Richardson called me and Reg mugs in his book published in 1991, but if we were mugs, what does that make him? We kept going a lot longer than he did, and we would have been okay if we hadn't made a couple of mistakes. The problem with the Richardson business and all the publicity was that it put even more police pressure on us, and of course Cornell was still free. He was always going to be a problem for us, but me and Reg weren't thinking about that too much at the time. We were in the process of trying to set up some links with the mafia in America. We were always looking to the future, and we thought that was the way to go. But getting into America was difficult because of our criminal records. They were a bit choosy about who they let in. Then I met an American fella by the name of Peter Wyant. He was known as a wheeler dealer, a Mr. Fix-It, and he seemed to have plenty of contacts. He said to me one day, "I hear you can't get a visa to go to the States. Well, I can get you there." It was going to cost, of course. He took me to the American Embassy in Paris, and he seemed to know people there. He had a long talk with a woman, and eventually she said to me, "I know you have got convictions, but you will be allowed to go to America for a few days on holiday. Everything will be fixed," and it was. Eventually, I flew to America with a friend of mine called Dickie Morgan, but when we landed at Kennedy Airport in New York, a reception committee was waiting for us. The FBI were there and they searched us. They found nothing, but we were then taken to the embassy in New York. After a lot of talking and questions, we were told we could stay in America for just 7 days, but we were told if we stepped out of line, we would be thrown out immediately. Wyant took us to meet Joe Kaufman, an Italian-American Jew who was to be our middleman, our contact with the mafia. Kaufman was friendly and said he would set up a meet with Frankie Liano, one of the top men with the famous New York mafia family, the Gallos. They were three brothers, Joe Gallo, also known as Crazy Joe, Larry and Al, who was known as Kid Blast because he would blow people away as soon as look at them. I was excited by this. Kaufman took me to a house in President Street in Brooklyn. We were told that Ileana was waiting for us in a private bar nearby. When we finally met, Frankie Liano told me to sit down, but while I was sitting down, his brother Armando, who was a tiny man known as the Dwarf, stood behind me with a weapon in his hand. I thought of the old saying, "Mark well the man whom God has marked." Frankie Liano asked me a lot of questions about our operation in London. Kaufman told him he could check me out with a gangster called Angelo Bruno from Philadelphia who had been to London and knew our setup. Ileano said, "Don't worry, I will." He then left the room to go to a phone. When he came back, he said, "I've checked you out, and Bruno says you're okay." I was relieved. After that, we had some coffee and spoke about doing a deal. The Americans were mainly interested in getting involved in gambling in London and other big cities like Birmingham and Manchester. They do that sort of thing in a big way. We were happy for them to do it, provided they counted us in. Ileano arranged for us to meet again that evening. He said he would show me around New York and I would meet some important people. That night, he took us to a club called the Mousetrap. Later, in another club, he gave me a note from Al Gallo. He said he was sorry he couldn't meet me in person, but I was hot. He said the FBI had a tail on me and were watching where I went and who I met. He also said he thought we could do business. I was pleased because I thought I had made a good contact. Frank Iliano then said to me, "Come on now, relax. Enjoy your time in the Big Apple." And that's what I did. I saw it all, the Bowery, Chinatown and Little Italy. The only place I didn't go was Harlem, because Martin Luther King had just been assassinated, and it was considered too dangerous for a white man to go there. I was pleased as well to meet some of my boxing heroes. I met Lee Omer, who had fought Britain's Tony Woodcock, Tony Zale, a former world middleweight champion, and the great Rocky Graziano, another former world middleweight champion. Graziano was a big hero of mine. I was surprised to discover that he was a chain smoker and drank a lot of scotch. He was a very nice fella though, and I spent a very pleasant evening with him in a steak bar called Gallagher's. The week passed quickly. I had a good time and I felt it had been useful for the future. In the end, we never got things going with the Americans like we wanted because of our own problems with the law, but we did do some business with them. It was a pity. It would have made us very powerful. But I did make some good contacts and some good friends, like Frank and Armando Ileano. I later gave Frank a diamond ring worth £1,000. Another good contact I made was a Sicilian American called Eddie Pucci, who was a close friend of Frank Sinatra. Later I used to meet with Pucci at the Hilton Hotel in London, and when we were talking in his room, he always played the radio really loud in case the room was bugged. Once he told me he liked old English bull terriers, so I sent him one to America. Eddie was our contact with a Chicago gangster called Sam Giancano. Both of them were later gunned to death. Another good friend was Joe Picano, claimed by the American press to be the top mafia boss, who died from a massive stroke. He became one of my best friends, and he sent me a gold cat's eye ring with 2 big diamonds in it. I treasure this ring. I once made up a poem about Joe Picano. I called it My Best Friend Joe. I returned to England quite happy and pleased. Soon after I got back, some of our American friends put our loyalty to the test. They asked us if we would help Joe Louis, the great American boxer who had fallen on hard times. Joe wanted to come to England for a holiday. We fixed it up and gave him a great time. I rang some good friends of ours, the Levy brothers, who ran the Dolce Vita nightclub in Newcastle, and they agreed to pay Joe £1,000 to appear at their club. I met Joe at Gatwick Airport and, with a friend called Mickey Morris, drove him up to Newcastle. While we were there, me and Mickey and a good friend called Sammy Lederman went with Joe on board an American aircraft carrier which was in the port. The Yank sailors were as excited as we were to meet him. I liked Joe Louis, and me and Reg have warm feelings for the Levy brothers, who later sent someone down with £5,000 to help with the costs of our court case. They were good friends at a time when good friends were hard to find. By 1967, things were still going fine, though we knew about Scotland Yard's interest in us, and in particular, a detective called Leonard Nipper Reid. Our business interests were still doing okay, but we never learned one good lesson from the Americans, and that was this. In America, a mafia boss doesn't kill his enemies himself, he gets someone else to do it. Me and Reg always did our own dirty business. And that was why, less than 2 years later, we were both locked away. The impossible had happened, the Krays had been got by the police, and all because we killed 2 men, Jack McVitie and George Cornell. And because we didn't realise how corrupt the legal system could be, and because we didn't realise we were surrounded by many traitors. Sir Joseph Simpson, the Home Office pathologist, said that McVitie and Cornell were such bad men that they wouldn't be missed. Maybe, but they've still cost us half of our lives. never killed George Cornell because he called me a fat poof. That's all lies, rubbish. No, if Cornell had called me a fat poof, I would have killed him there and then. No messing. I killed Cornell in the Blind Beggar public house because I had a pact, an agreement, with some other people, influential people, that if Cornell and the gang he was with, the Richardsons, south of the river, if they started a war, I would do something about it. Well, they did start a war. There was a battle at Mr. Smith's club, which was started by the Richardsons and Cornell. A very good friend of ours called Richard Hart got killed in the fight, yet he was just an innocent bystander. The Richardsons got done for that, but Cornell got away, so I kept to my word. Even though others didn't, I still kept to the pact. I went and done Cornell. I got a message that he was involved in the business at Mr. Smith's. I never thought about the police, I just done it. Cornell deserved it. He was a flash, arrogant bastard, and he was a bully. I never made any secret about doing Cornell. I'd known Cornell since I was a kid. He was from Watney Street in the East End. We knew him, but we were never what you'd call friends. That didn't stop us helping him out when he was a bit older, when he came out of the nick and he never had a bob to his name. We gave him a few quid and got him fixed up with some decent clothes, but that never made any difference. There was always a bit of a problem. He was that kind of fella. Eventually, he moved south of the river and joined up with the Richardsons. He was always a vicious bastard, but I was never frightened of him or his older brother Jimmy, who had a badly scarred face after he got slashed. Cornell was under 6 feet tall, but he was a powerful fellow with a big, thick neck. When we had our problem, he was only in his mid-30s, but he looked a lot older. He had a sort of curled lip which always made it look like he was sneering at you. He liked violence. Like I said, he used to take old tramps down to a cellar and torture them. I don't know about the Richardsons torturing people. I don't know about that, but I know that Cornell did. He enjoyed it. He once got 3 years for slashing a woman's face. He was a lippy bastard. When me and Reg were in Brixton on a menaces charge, he told a friend of ours, "The king is dead." This was a deliberate insult to me. It was Cornell saying he hoped they would put me inside. It was not a good thing to say. It was out of order. Maybe things would have been okay, but then there was the business at Mr. Smith's when our friend Richard Hart got shot dead. Richard Hart was a real nice fellow, a good friend. He wasn't a gangster or anything like that, and he had a nice wife and 2 young kids. He never deserved to get it, and it shouldn't have happened at a place like Mr. Smith's. It was a nice club. It wasn't a rough place. After Richard Hart was shot, the Richardsons were soon arrested. So was Frankie Fraser. That was fair enough. They'd all been involved. But somehow Cornell never got picked up for it. Or if he was, he must have had a good alibi. Anyway, a few days later, Cornell turns up again right out of the blue. I can remember the date as if it was yesterday. The 6th of March, 1966. I'm having a drink in a pub called the Lion in Tap Street. This pub was also called the Widows, or Madge's, because it was run by a widow called Madge. There was a few of us there drinking, me, Reg, Ian Barry, Scotch Jack Dixon and some others. Then I got a phone call. I had already had a message that Cornell had been involved at Mr. Smith's. Like I said, I had given my word that I would deal with Cornell. This phone call tells me that Cornell is drinking at a pub called the Blind Beggar, which is right in the middle of our manor and less than half a mile away from where we were all sat drinking. I told Ian Barry to come with me, and I told John Dixon to get a car and to drive us to the Beggars. It's funny, really. I read one of them London tourist guides which someone gave me the other day, and it talks about the Beggars in there. It said, the newly renovated Blind Beggar gained notoriety when Ronnie Kray and an accomplice murdered George Cornell as he sat drinking there. The pub's atmosphere has changed dramatically now, and with a pleasant garden for children, it has become, like so many other East End pubs, a place for the entire family. It must have changed a hell of a lot then. In 1966, it was nothing like that. It was a depressing place. It had a flat front and two long bars which curved in a short of U shape and joined up the back in the rear snug. That's all there was to it. The public bar on the right, the saloon bar on the left, and the snug at the end. And the landlord's accommodation was upstairs above the bars. The place wasn't smartly done out or anything like that, and it always seemed sort of dark in there. It was a depressing pub. The only interesting thing about it was its name, which was based on an East End play, 400 years old, called The Blind Beggar of Bethnal Green. It's part of East End folklore, the story of Bessay, the daughter of a blind beggar who was being courted by four rich men, a knight, a businessman, an innkeeper's son, and an aristocrat. They all wanted to marry her until they learned that her father was a beggar. Then they lost interest, all except the knight, who went to her father and asked if he could marry her. Then Bessay's father, who everyone thought was a beggar, surprised everyone by giving her £100 for her wedding gown, which was like thousands in them days, and a dowry of £3,000, which was like a small fortune. Then, at the end of the story, at the wedding feast, the blind beggar reveals that he is the son of Simon de Montfort, who founded England's Parliament. Everyone thought he had died in the Battle of Evesham, but in fact he had only lost his sight. His life was saved by a lady who later bore him a child, who was, of course, the beautiful Bessay of Bethnal Green, and she and the knight, so they say, lived happily ever after. Well, me old cockers, that's your lot for this time. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section.